This animal cracker looks like a camel, but it doesn't taste like camels. Hey kids, welcome to today's lesson. Today we're talking about things like evidence and how historians do what they do. So you should have just watched a video on the difference between primary and secondary sources, which is something that we're going to go over in a little more detail right here. But let's start at the top, shall we? Historians ask questions about how or why something happened, like why did World War I start? What was the favorite food of the royalty during the Ming Dynasty? How scary are Indian war elephants? These are all things people want to know. The historians must find evidence, which is something that shows proof or an indication that something is true. Written documents or other materials that can be seen are a type of evidence. We already talked about two types of sources. Let's hit that one more time. Primary sources are first-hand pieces of evidence, like a book written from that time period. And a secondary source is a source that was not made in the time of the event. These sources are often written using information from a primary source. Examples would be an encyclopedia or even your textbook. Some other things to consider when using historical sources. Is it reliable? Does this seem to be a good source? It's a question you have to ask. One must consider why or where the book was written. For example, a diary written by a medieval court jester that hated the king might not exactly be a good source for information on, say, the governance in Old Britain. This leads us to point of view. In the jester example, one must consider that the point of view was from the jester and not, say, a better source like the prime minister. The jester might also have bias or unreasoned emotional judgment that could warp the historical accuracy of the source. For example, if the jester's diary, he hated the king because he embarrassed him all the time and he just wrote that he was a terrible person and all that, you have to consider that jester's bias, his feelings towards the king. Let's talk about writing about history. Historians write about events, drawing conclusions, and making inferences from the information they have. Inferences are basically logical guesses. One might infer that I have bad eyesight because I wear glasses. That's a pretty easy inference. But making inferences on events long ago is a little bit tougher. There's bias, point of view, and reliability that must be considered when a historian tries to make inferences of the past. You have to read many sources, making sure the facts are consistent. For example, I'm doing a research project on the mystical unicorn. This is an example here. I read 4 books on unicorns. The first one says that unicorns love eating children. I say to myself, whoa, I had no idea that unicorns love to eat little children. So I checked the other 3 books, and they say nothing like that. Turns out the author of the first book that I read had his kid maimed in a terrible unicorn accident. His bias has now tainted the facts, and his book is now a questionable primary source of information on unicorns for my unicorn research project. It's a good thing I confirmed the information and dug a little deeper. Such is the job of a good historian. Make sure you're cross-referencing, checking your sources, and having consistent facts across the board. So your text goes on to explain that if my research paper was going to be published, it would be checked over and reviewed by other historians, likely other experts in unicornography, to make sure that I wasn't publishing a bunch of malarkey. This is something historians do. One last thing I want to hit before we conclude our lesson is the concept of interpretations. Facts can only be viewed through people, and people have different ways of seeing things. That means that even though people have the same facts, these facts can be seen differently. For example, my twin brother used the exact same 4 books I had, the same information, to write his own paper on unicorns, and determined through his own interpretation that unicorns are not gentle and majestic, but lazy and smelly. They only appear gentle because they are so lazy that they don't move. That's his interpretation. We had the exact same facts, but came to different conclusions because we interpreted the facts differently. I did forget to mention conclusions. Conclusions is a final decision reached by reasoning. It's like an inference that is your final answer. Through my research of unicorns, I concluded that unicorns are gentle and majestic creatures. That's my final answer. I'm sticking to it. That is my conclusion. So we've pretty much gone over the lesson for the day. There's our unicorn that's not looking very gentle or majestic. You have a quiz. It's not terrible. Something we've definitely gone over in detail. It's a little essay question. We'll preview it right here. It's worth 5 points. You're going to be basically telling me what a primary source is and a secondary source and giving me an example of each. So it's really 4 parts. What is a primary source? What is an example? What is a secondary source? What is an example? And the 5th point will be your spelling and grammar, so make sure you check that. That's your lesson for today. It's where you can stop. If you have any questions, please let me know. Make sure you read the section in the book in addition to the lesson. Alright, have a good day.